Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Krista Moore Show. This show is brought to you by K-Coaching as a new way to learn from industry experts and thought leaders. And I'm here to help you get on your fast track to success. And today I have a fabulous guest, and I'm thrilled to have her on my show. Her name is Deb Calvert, and some of you might know who she is. She's a very popular and successful author, sales and executive coach, and also the founder and president of her own company, which is People First PS. Hi, Deb.
Hello, everybody. Hi, Krista. Really nice to be joining you.
Yeah, it's great. And we didn't like plan our matching wardrobe today, but I think we look pretty good
Yeah,
in our black and white.
lots of pattern today.
That's right. Well, I'm just glad that you took the time to spend with me and my audience today because there is so much we could talk about. We have a lot in common in terms of our interest in seeing sales leaders be successful. And you have written so many articles and books and just have a wealth of information. We're going to try and slim that down to some real key nuggets, so to speak, that they can take away with them today. But before we begin, I'd love for you to introduce yourself to the audience and just give them a little bit of your background.
Sure. Well, I live in a place called Peculiar, Missouri, and that'll tell you a lot that you need to know. It's a tiny little town, and it's rural, and I'm getting ready for gardening season, which will be awesome. Professionally, my company is People First Productivity Solutions, and it's a company that focuses on sales productivity, leadership development, and team effectiveness. What those three have in common, of course, is that it's all about connecting people. And the work that we do is very much around getting you connected to the right people and in the right ways. I also have a little side project called the Sales Experts Channel. That's my labor of love nonprofit, and it has this amazing collection. Every year, it's a little different collection of sales experts who just give stuff away. So the salesexpertschannel.com if you want to know more about that.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure that you mentioned that, Deb, because I think that's where I first discovered you, so to speak, was the Sales Expert Channel. You have a wonderful program. And then we also are a part of the Women Sales Pros. What do we call that? Like a,
Um, Organization?
yeah, but I feel like it's so much more than that, right? It's like
It is.
a sisterhood.
I
Maybe,
like that, yes.
yeah. But so I really have been a fan of your work over the years, and I've kind of looked up to what you've done in terms of leading different initiatives and crusades, so to speak. And we'll be talking about that today as well before we end our show. But when we had our pre-talk, we thought one of the best things that we could contribute to today's audience would be to share the 3 E's of sales management. And why don't you just kind of tell us conceptually where this came from?
Sure. First of all, I think that the job of sales manager is one of the hardest jobs on the planet because you have so
Yes.
many people to answer to and you get pulled in so many directions, and it's a job that's actually not all that well defined. So anything we can do to put a little bit of something into your life that makes it easier, hopefully you'll be able to take it and use it. And what we'll be talking about today doesn't require extra time. You don't have to block a minute on your calendar. These are just some ideas to fold into everything else that you're doing. It's more about the how than the what.
Yeah. And I'm not sure that you know this, but I was a sales leader for many years,
Mhm.
and I was thrown into that position because I was a good salesperson,
Yes, me
and
too.
I didn't know what I was doing. We use that adage, fake it till you make it kind of thing, which I hate even the thought of that. But there was a bit of imposter kind of going on because I was trying to be a sales manager without really knowing how effective I was or not.
Yeah, in my former job, before I started my own company about 15 years ago, I was a Fortune 500 corporate director, and I oversaw 31 markets, working with the sales teams, and I saw everybody struggling and nobody really feeling comfortable to ask for help, to say, look, I don't know what to do.
Mhm.
And it is a very vulnerable, lonely job at times.
Well, and I think that there's this struggle for sales managers in terms of where they spend their time, right? Whether it's actually developing their people, or are they focused on the sales and the end result and the financial? What's your experience with that?
I think it all focuses because it's sales. The focus goes right back to financial all the,
Mhm.
what's the goal, what's the quota, give me the forecast, where are we, how are we to budget. It's constant, it's a barrage, and that's actually looking at the wrong thing. If you look at results only, you're not looking at actions that drive results. And even if you do that as a sales manager, you're forgetting that it's individual beliefs and experiences of salespeople that are going to drive those actions no matter what you say or do,
That's
unless you're
right.
right there.
And so that's where I think your 3 E's really are applicable, because we're going to talk through the 3 E's just to make it easier, so to speak, to remember maybe the people components of the role. And when you were naming those three to me, the first word, I had to look it up because this is like a vocabulary lesson. Um, Entelechy, did I pronounce that right?
Entelechy.
Entelechy. So,
Yes.
and then after I looked it up, I'm like, this is my new favorite word. So entelechy is the first E, and I'd love for you to describe what that means.
We should probably spell it too, because people are going to
Yeah,
go look it up. It's such a great word. So, Entelechy, Entelechy. It's a real word. And when you go study it, you look up the word origins, it gets even cooler. But it means realizing full potential of something. So if you are focused on entelechy, you're doing the work to bring something or someone to their full potential, which of course can have some pretty dramatic and outstanding results in the world of selling. So here's what's funny to me, Krista. In big companies, when they talk about potential, it's usually in the form of labeling people. Oh, Krista, she's high potential. We're going to keep our eye on her. And Deb, I don't know. She's maybe mid-range. She might even be low potential. She's probably doing all she can. We put these labels on people as if that's what it will always be. You're hypo, I'm low po. And frankly, if you call people hypo and low po, I think you just end up with a lot of popo, which is passed over and pissed off. But but sales managers, you have a chance to reframe this. If you could be focused instead of labeling people and expecting them to figure out their own potential, if you could do some things to help them reach their full potential, entelechy, suddenly you have so much more to work with.
yes, and something that you mentioned before we were talking about these three is looking at everyone on your team as individuals, and they have their own unique potential. And it's really our job as a sales manager to be able to identify that and just reach in there and help pull that strength out.
Agreed. We, because of the focus on financial and because of how far thinly you're spread in your work that you do, right? We tend to throw money at stuff. Oh, let me put a spiff on that, or maybe I'll tweak the quota just a little bit, and that's supposed to motivate a person,
Mhm.
but it's not sustainable. And how often can you really do that sort of thing? You, I think I'd say it this way. Instead of lighting a fire underneath someone, you'll get a lot further if you ignite a spark within them. And that's what
Yeah,
Entelechy can
I
help you
actually
do.
have a good example of this,
Yeah.
and I just saw this morning in LinkedIn, actually. One of our fellow women sales pros had a video that I was listening to with Sherry Leventon,
Mm.
and she was a sales rep for Marriott, and she was told by her sales manager, her boss, that she had some unique talents. And because she was told that, she, started realizing, oh my gosh, maybe I am a good salesperson and maybe I do have this potential. And then she became kind of number one in her division. And eventually she kept hearing that same message from her boss, you have unique talents. And it motivated her to be number one in the country for Marriott.
Wow. It's true. Human nature, we will rise to other people's expectations or we'll lower our own expectations to suit what people think of us. So
Bingo. So if you're a sales leader out there today and you might have labeled one of your sales reps, maybe a veteran or soon to be retired, or just leave him alone. He's going to be gone soon, kind of thing. And that happens. Instead of doing something about that, then that's how you're going to treat them, as well as that's how they're going to receive, how you're managing them.
Well, and it happens at the other end of the spectrum too. How often have you heard, oh yeah, we tell our new hires because it's only fair. It takes a full 6 months, maybe a year to really ramp up here, right? You've just suppressed the expectation.
Isn't that, yeah, that's the truth. And that happens frequently.
It does.
When I hear you say that, when we're talking about realization of potential, what can sales managers do? One, two, three kind of things, tools to start to realize that that is kind of an easy thing that they can play out in their role.
Yes. Well, okay, let's start with what you were talking about, which is the motivation that a person might have. And there are two kinds of motivation, extrinsic and intrinsic.
Mhm.
Intrinsic comes from inside the person, the individual. Like the example you gave with Sherry, she took personal pride. She saw something special in herself that fueled her. Very different from extrinsic, which is what we almost always use in selling, the quota, the whatever else, the spiff, the president's club. Those are all extrinsic, and they're all temporary, and they're not self-sustaining. So better to look for the individual motivators of every single individual. Takes time, sure. But when you are learning about people, observing people, seeing what it is that drives them, don't make an assumption it's always money and sales. That's just not true. So you can do that. That's the first thing. The second thing that I think I'd offer for how to reach potential, it really is about um, challenging people. There's a doctor, Csikszentmihalyi, I won't even try to spell it, call him Dr. C, but he's at the University of Chicago. And his research, everybody knows it, it's about being in the zone, what he called in the flow. And when you're in the flow, right, this is when you do your very best work. You barely get tired doing it. You push yourself. It's fun. The day flies by and you achieve extraordinary things. Well, being in the zone happens when the level of challenge slightly, not vastly, but slightly exceeds your current level of capability or experience. So sales managers to provide a challenge to get people in the flow, in the zone, you've got to look for that and not let them slog through the same thing day after day after day. That's the
Yeah,
drone zone, and they'll be bored.
yes, I love that that concept. I had heard of the flow, but I didn't know where it was originated. But I do believe, I was just thinking of myself when you mentioned about the challenge exceeds kind of, and I'm thinking, yeah, I'm motivated by a challenge. And I
Yes.
would think that most people are.
And that's about how you get people to their potential. You help them to find little ways to build that competence and that confidence so they can grow.
That's great. How about the second E in this, which is ennoblement, which I looked up that word too to make sure I was really clear.
Okay.
So that's the second E, ennoblement. Can you describe that for us?
You bet. And I think we should have a vocabulary test at the end.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
um, to ennoble someone means to make them feel worthy or important. It's a little used word. We use its opposite a lot more often, ignoble. The word ignoble means to make someone feel inferior. And so that's in a little bit more wide usage. But I think in an age of sales enablement, oftentimes what's missing is ennoblement. We enable with tools and training and tactics and techniques and that big old tech stack that you have, tons of things that you do to enable. But if you're leaving out the individual and acting as if all the tools and processes that you spent a boatload of money on, if you act as if that's what's going to get them there, you're really setting the salesperson aside. So at the same time that you're enabling, you want to be ennobling. This isn't about fake makeup stuff. It's not to be non-manipulative. It's to really, truly, here again with their individual motivations and knowing the individuals, how do you help them to see the value of what they're doing in the work that they um, also make a commission on, right? But it doesn't have to be just that.
Mhm. It's an interesting description of what you're wanting to achieve. I feel like it's enabling them to be a part of something bigger, to be connected to a larger purpose, and you're kind of putting them on this platform, so to speak. Am I looking at that right?
No, that's actually very much a part of it. And they say that the millennial generation needs this more than other generations. I'm not a millennial, and I sure do like it. So I wouldn't I wouldn't be exclusive here. But it's not about awards. It's not about constant recognition. It is about the purpose of the work and people seeing value in the contributions that they make. Belonging is an important aspect of anybody being able to stay fully involved in the work.
Yeah. And I think too, it's kind of elevating their status when I think of ennoblement. It's like elevating their purpose, their status, their importance that is essential. And especially in sales, right? I mean, sometimes sales has a bad connotation, or this is wiping that clean and rising them to the occasion.
Yeah, and I don't even know if I, I like the visual of elevate, but I might even say it's about giving due where it's credit where it's due,
Yeah,
right? They should be already seen that way in the organization. The organization doesn't thrive and exist without them.
that's a
So
great point.
right, let's just give that credit.
And that's an easy thing to do for sales managers. Like you said, this isn't something you have to block out time on your calendar or go to a conference. This is
No,
something that just to be aware and to start using that with your employees.
it really surprises me how often I run across salespeople in an organization who have no idea what happens after they bring the revenue in. They don't know that when the whole sales organization misses quota for the second quarter in a row, it means people over in this other department are going to be on furlough or losing their job. They don't know that product development is either going to increase or decrease next year based on the sales contributions that they make. So yeah, there are super easy ways to do
Oh,
this.
it's just making that connection, I think, really for a lot of people,
Yes.
reminding them too, showing them.
Hmm.
That's great. What is number 3? I know it has to do with engagement, but
Yes, and
is
it
that
is. It's disengagement.
Mhm. Good?
We'll make one of them easy. Um,
I know that word.
Employee engagement. Yes. I think a lot of people, because it's a buzzword, it gets thrown around a ton. A lot of people may not understand fully what it means and how powerful it is. So I'd like to talk about those two things. First, a definition. Employee engagement, it is the emotional connection that an individual feels toward their organization that causes them to apply additional discretionary effort. So two-parter, the emotional, not rational, but emotional connection they feel, that's what causes them to make a choice. And every employee always has a choice, but how much additional discretionary effort are they going to apply? The connection triggers that. And when you have the emotional connection, you have people who stick around longer. And when you have the additional discretionary effort, you have an increase in productivity by every possible measure, including sales numbers. Not only that, but you have higher levels of customer satisfaction and both increases in top line revenue and profitability. This is all, there are reams of research that prove everything I'm saying. So it really begs the question, if I could get all of that beautiful domino effect coming out of employee engagement, then what is it that causes an employee to feel that emotional connection? What is it that I can do to increase engagement?
That was my
And
next question.
yeah, um, this has been measured. So Jim Kouzes and Barry Posner, they write a lot of books in the leadership development space, and they've done quite a bit of research on this globally. And they've researched every kind of demographic characteristic you could think of, like how long they've been with the company, how old a person is, etc. And demographic variables make absolutely no difference in employee engagement. What does make double-digit increases in employee engagement is the person that you report to, your relationship with, the behaviors of that leader that you report to.
Oh
That
yeah.
is everything when it comes to employee engagement. And let me just give you, since I'm talking about Jim and Barry, I'll just read you a little quote from them. This is
Mhm.
also research-based, and that is that the best leaders, the ones who are doing all the right things, right? The best leaders elicit 3 times the amount of talent, energy, commitment, and motivation from employees compared to their counterparts. So we're not talking about something small here. This can be a really big payoff if you
Could be
get good
huge.
at
Mhm.
engaging employees.
If I'm a sales manager and I almost want to assess whether I'm good at this or that I maybe am part of the problem, what would you recommend?
Oh, that's a great question. If morale is low in your organization, you're part of the problem. And that's brutal truth. Yes, there might be lots of things going on throughout the organization, the industry, the territory, but your people are counting on you to help them find their way through it or stick with it despite all those other circumstances. Your connection with people, sometimes that's all they've got. And if morale is low, you have a choice. You can either jump right in there with the group. Maybe you came out of that group to begin with. You can let your morale be low too, and you can empathize and you can do an us versus them, but that's not going to help. And pretty soon you'll start losing people. So if your retention rate is not so good, if you have a lot of turnover on your team, I have
Another.
to say the same thing. It's yeah,
And
you're doing something.
there's a statistic that I heard, I think it was like 79% of people do leave their job because of their boss and that
Yes,
relationship with their boss. And it might even be higher than that. And I see this happen frequently in any type of sales coaching or business coaching. There's always a relationship conversation that there's conflict or it's damaging or they're not communicating or addressing a particular relationship that really could make the difference between that person's success or not. And
absolutely.
if I'm a sales manager today, and let's say I have 10 salespeople that report to me, can you offer a recommendation or a tool to start to have those conversations?
Yeah. Um, a good old-fashioned one-to-one meeting. And if you have to do it every other week, do it at least every other week. This gives you an opportunity to give feedback to people. And you have to get good at feedback. A little tool for giving feedback to people is called the 3W feedback approach. Just tell them what, that's got to be very specific. Tell them why it matters, the impact, and tell them the way forward, what they should be doing differently. If you aren't having opportunities to give people feedback, you're not reaching their full potential. They don't know what to do. But also, you are playing right into the number one reason that people cite for leaving organizations, and this includes salespeople. The number one reason people leave is that they didn't know how to be successful. They didn't get feedback from their manager that helped them to see alternative ways to be successful.
Mhm.
And, we think in sales that people leave because they can go somewhere else and make more money. The truth is, in that Gallup research, more money is reason number 5. The first 4 reasons above that are all related to the manager.
Yes.
And the reason that it comes back to us as I can make more money is that they start looking because of those other 4 reasons, and they make the decision when they find something that pays better.
Well, and as a manager, we don't want to admit that they left because of us. It just is a way easier out to say that they left because of
Yes.
money.
Yes. Except then you're doomed to repeat whatever was going on.
Exactly. hmm we work with many sales leaders, and what we're talking about today is so prevalent. And I always say that the number one differentiator between those companies that are knocking the ball out of the park and those that are slow to grow is effective sales leadership. And when I hear just these 3 easy things, it it makes me feel like it just needs a little bit of attention.
Yeah. You have to do 2 things in your job, and I know it feels like there are 5 million other things you have to do, but the top 2 things you do are manage sales and lead people. And they are 2 different things. If you are managing the sales team, you might be forgetting to lead people. And that's where all of the goodness that we've described comes from is your leadership.
Yeah, and one of the tools that you recommended, I certainly would echo the importance of, which is a regularly scheduled monthly one-on-one where it's predetermined. This is the sacred time that we're going to be together. There's nothing more important than that. You're both coming prepared to have great conversations around yourself personally and also your business, and prepared to give and accept the feedback that's needed. And I think it would touch upon all three of your three E's if you would create that space.
Yes. And
Mhm.
just to put a fine point on it, it's not the monthly meeting where you're going over revenue and making a forecast. That's a different meeting. This is a meeting about the salesperson's individual growth and development. You're not
Mhm.
looking back and beating up on them. It's not, feedback about all the things they didn't do. It's about them setting goals and you helping them to find ways to reach those goals and unleash that potential.
Yeah, that's great. And many of the listeners I know are fans of Race to Amazing, the book that is over here. And we have an example in there of a one-on-one meeting format that touches on exactly what you're referring to.
Good.
So hopefully they'll go back and check that out as well. Now, I understand that you're on a crusade, and I think that that's the right word, movement, crusade, but you're very passionate about it, and is to create a new word and to get this word in the dictionary and to get this word used amongst sales professionals. So why don't you tell us a little story
Yeah.
about your new word?
We really are going to have a vocabulary test. That's the theme today, is new words. Now, I didn't make up Entelechy or Ennoblement. They're bona fide real words. I did make this one up, and it's because I was frustrated by the word that we currently use. The word we currently use when we talk about our profession, we say things like salesman, and we say then saleswomen. But here we have all these other industries that have replaced those kinds of terms with gender neutral ones. Like when you go to a restaurant, you have a server. It's not a waiter and a waitress any longer. Or what started me thinking about this was when I was on an airplane on a flight to Denver last fall, and I thought about flight attendant, right? Not steward, not stewardess. So why are we salesmen and saleswomen? It kind of started there. And I went back to something I had thought about many years ago when I wrote my first book, Discover Questions. I made a deliberate choice to use the word seller because I just thought it was simpler, easier, and more accurate to blanket all different kinds of sales titles. Seller, one who sells. That's how it's defined in the dictionary. So in this ponderous moment, I went and looked to see if the word salesman or saleswoman had seller as a synonym, because then it's just an easy replacement that way. And I was surprised to learn that neither of those words used seller as a synonym, but they didn't even use the opposite word. Salesman didn't say saleswoman, and they didn't even have the same definitions. Saleswoman had things that were like the synonyms were things like clerk, and salesman had synonyms that were more professional. And I just thought that was interesting. So then it got me thinking even more. And here's where the crusade came in. I realized that we're all under this umbrella of salesmanship, right? The techniques we use, they're called
Yeah.
salesmanship. And that word not only is gender specific, but it also has a stigma, like
Yeah,
some
and it's kind of
stereotype attached to
old
it.
school traditional.
Yeah. So that's the word we need to replace. We're all sellers, and the natural outcome of sellers is that we are engaged in sellership, just like leaders engage in leadership.
So
So,
sellership is the new word.
yeah,
I
I got
love
it into Urban Dictionary already. I've got Business Dictionary. I'm working on them. And I want to get this into Merriam-Webster, which requires the word to be
it.
truly in common usage.
Yes. You know, it's interesting because in all of my writing around sales and sales leadership, I always used salesperson or sales rep, thinking that was, kind of neutral. And then I saw the term seller in a lot more articles and publications. And I thought, well, that's probably the word to use. Now I will be certain to carry on your crusade and use sellership because it's like leadership, leader, seller, sellership. And we
Yes.
talked about shipbuilding. Shipbuilding is building and being intentional on building relationships and partnerships that matter, and it's a ship word. So I'm naturally kind of aligned to it.
Aye, aye, Captain. Yes. Yes.
Perfect.
Of the ship. Good.
Is there anything else you wanted to make sure that we mentioned today? We have a minute or so left.
Well, I want people to know, I assume they do since they're here with you, but just in case they came in from one of my little social media messages, if you're not already following Krista and this podcast, you really should be. And her book, Race to Amazing, is the one that you ought to race to the bookstores and get. I really, really like your book.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Deb.
Mhm.
I'm going to show a slide that has your contact information, and maybe you can kind of redirect people to that.
Okay.
I think I wanted to make sure that we had your, is that the right one? Yeah, so can you see that?
Yep, that's showing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I always enjoy follow-ups and continuing conversations. You're welcome to email me. Find me on social media. On Twitter, I'm People First PS. On LinkedIn, Deb Calvert. And let's just keep the conversation going. Let me know when you're using the word sellership too. I want to give you a shout out because I
Yeah, I
appreciate it.
think we need to hashtag that.
We are sellership, yes. Hashtag
That's
sellership,
great.
yes.
And you are very active socially, so I think that's a terrific place for people to connect with you. And what is the name of your book?
Oh, I have two books. The first one was Discover Questions, Get You Connected. That one has, for the last 4 or 5 years, made the list of HubSpot's top 20 most highly rated sales books of all time. I was the first woman, the first self-published book to be on there, so that was kind of fun. And then the second book, more recent, is Stop Selling and Start Leading. And it's about discovering when you sell how you actually can lead your buyers. It's based on research with 530 B2B buyers.
That's great. Well, thank you for sharing that with our audience. And thank you for taking the time out today. I'm just thrilled that we got to spend some time together. And I
Thank you.
appreciate
Me
it.
too.
Take care. Thank you.